Now on Sports Talk, it's SC Wild with Major Billy Downer of the Department of Natural Resources. Major Downer is here to take your questions about the great outdoors in South Carolina. Give him a call at 888-898-2525. It's SC Wild from DNR on the Sports Talk Radio Network.
Time for another edition of SC Wild, and we have got Major Billy Downer joining us now just ahead of this 4th of July holiday. We're also going to have Officer Edwina Mathis join us. Major Downer, we'll start with you while we get Officer Mathis on the line with us. But 4th of July weekend and so much to celebrate. But I know that you and at DNR and all your fellow officers, I know it also puts you on high alert because safety's always at the forefront when we all get out as South Carolinians together.
Hey.
Oh, hey, Major Downer, you with us?
Hey, I lost you.
Hey, okay. All right, we've got you back.
Okay. We're good?
We got you back. We are good. I was just saying, Major Downer, I know that the 4th of July weekend, look, a great holiday, and what a great state we have with all of our waterways and lakes and opportunity to enjoy it. And I think we're going to have good weather across the state. But I know that at DNR, you have to be diligent as well and remind everybody, to take care of their neighbors when they're out there as well. I know safety is always on your mind when we talk about holidays.
So, yeah, we're in the July 4th week. Again, we're in the middle of what we call, the 100 deadly days of summer, and that's not to be negative. It's just to remind folks that the time, as we always say, between Memorial Day and Labor Day are the 100 most deadliest days on our waterways and our highways. So we partner with the State Highway Patrol, Department of Public Safety, and DNR partners together to remind our boaters, our people driving, to go to visit people, to have parties tomorrow for 4th of July, to celebrate, to be safe on the road and on the waterways. And our part, of course, is the waterways. And our big part for us, it's about being safe in your boat, going to where you're going so you can come back and enjoy time at home again and to go back out again. So the things, we always talk about, this weekend is just very important because there are so many more people out there. Already tonight, I'm hearing a word from lakes, local lakes, just a lot of crowds gathering already. People getting ready to celebrate tomorrow. Because the 4th is during the week, sometimes that'll affect the number of people out there. It won't be quite as big a crowd maybe until the weekend because people got to work on Friday. But people are off tomorrow. They're going to be on the water. And for whatever reason, the 4th is that time of year when folks find the boat wherever they can and get on the water. Sometimes they pull whatever boat they can that they found from the neighbor or whatever else, and they haven't gone through it. The motor doesn't run right. They get stranded out in the water, and it becomes a frustrating day. So some of the things I want to remind folks, remember, go through your boat before you get on the water. Don't get such a hurry on 4th of July to get out there. Make sure that you gas the boat up. You've got your oil like you need for your boat, for your motor, if it's not a 4-stroke. That you pre-mix the oil, all those things that you don't have a problem on the water. Make sure you've got life jackets. You'll always hear me talk about life jackets. Make sure you've got enough personal flotation devices for everybody in the boat. Make sure that they fit the intended user. So if you've got young children, make sure the life jacket will fit them properly. Don't put an adult life jacket in the boat and expect that to count for a toddler, a 5-year-old, even an 8 or 9-year-old. Make sure it fits the intended user. We talked about this in the past, that the Coast Guard has changed the way they're marking life jackets. So if you were used to seeing type 1, 2, or 3, which was able to be used in a boat, now they are labeled by their flotation ability, so 70, 100, and 150. And then that is just a number that they're using now to be trying to kind of match up with Canada a little bit. Or the United States and Canada have a numbering system that makes sense but so 70 is what used to be our old Type 3s. So if the life jacket says 70 inside and says U.S. Coast Guard approved, that's going to work, and that's going to be what we call a recreational or Type 3 life jacket. It's the kind you would wear if you're skiing, if you're being pulled on a tube, that will work. Your 100 is going to have more, it's going to float better. That's more what we call a near-shore device. And then the 150 is going to be like your Type 1s used to be, which were offshore, if you were going offshore. So the thing about South Carolina is we always talk about from the mountains to the sea. We have water from the coast all the way to the mountains and Joe Cassie Gorges. So there's so many different types of waterways that folks will go out in the water tomorrow. And, you know, I typically talk about inland or lake systems or rivers and what you need to have there. But when you go on the coast, it's a totally different game. And have we got our guest with us tonight?
We do. We have Officer Edwina Mathis joining us as well, Major Downer.
Edwina, thank you for joining us tonight.
No, thank you, guys.
All right, well, I'm glad to have her. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little story about her right now. I went looking for a coastal expert, and I got informed by a long-time officer who has got years of experience. He said she is the new expert because I have taught her everything I know. So we're going to let Officer Mathis be our coastal expert tonight, and I expect nothing but the best information from her.
I appreciate that. I might not be quite the expert, but I'll do my best.
Hey, it's a vote of confidence, though. What a great vote of confidence for you. Inland waterways, I always talk about life jackets. I always talk about, make sure that you plan your trip, tell people where you're going so people know where you're going, when you expect to return. We always talk about float plans in voter education classes. We tell people about life jackets, your whistles, your registration card. Make sure your registration's right on the boat. You've got a fire extinguisher that works. You got the whistle or horn sound device. But on the coast, there's other things that people have to have sometimes. And I know that flares, those type signal devices are required on the coast. Isn't that right?
Offshore, you got to have those on board. We tend to see a lot of boats inshore that have them on there because everybody's ready to be prepared. But we definitely suggest it because if you end up outside of an inlet, you're going to want something like that to show where you are.
Absolutely. So we talked about this before the show, but in coastal waters tomorrow, Charleston Harbor, surrounding areas, Ashley River, Wando River, all those areas, what's the number one violation that y'all see down there on a regular basis, particularly on big weekends?
So violation-wise, we have a ton of wake zones spread out all throughout the coastal area. And people tend to not really know and understand what idle speed is when they're going through those wake zones. So usually they end up with a ticket or a good warning because they're going on plane. They're either going on plane or they're plowing. And people think that plowing is idle speed, but it's a little bit too much. And if you look behind you and you see that white water, that means you're going way too fast. Idle speed, I always tell everybody the definition is just fast enough to have forward momentum and maintain steerage. And down here in the coast, that's pretty important because you might have the current pushing against you, so you got to give it a little bit more. So in terms of wake zones down here, it's never a set speed. It's just how the water's moving around you and how fast you can go against it.
So that's a great point. I want to highlight something you said because in our upper, in inland lakes, we have wake zones, of course. Typically, you see a wake zone, which is part of the non-lateral system. That's a white buoy with an orange circle on it, and it's going to say no wake. It's going to say no wake, in this area potentially. You see the words no wake. And we know that typically is around landings that have fueling facilities, public landings, areas of congestion. But on the coast, it's a little bit different. There's a lot more of them, and sometimes they can be extremely long, like Wapu Cut, for instance. I know, Edwina, you're familiar with that.
Yeah, you're gonna spend a good 45 minutes, and on a hot day, it's a long 45 minutes cruising through that wake zone.
Right, but it is what it is. It's there for reasons that we don't control. It's there. Our officers are doing, their job because the owners along that, trust me, they know it's a wake zone. And if you're not at idle speed, they're going to be calling, complaining, screaming at you from the side of the waterway. And they're going to make it known you're not following that rule. So it's a good point. Now, on the coast in wake zones, you got to really, really be paying attention. You will see some signs that aren't real. Dwayne, let's talk about that for a minute, too, because on the same side of let's follow our wake zones, there are some areas where you'll see signs that say no wake, but they don't have a DNR sticker on them.
Yeah, so down here, we have a big issue with, is it my waters or public waters? And so people put stuff up on their docks that, it says no wake and it doesn't have a DNR emblem. DNR, we put out the no wake zone buoys that you can specifically tell it's from us, provided by us, but we also have responsible for your wake signs. And those are in areas where it might be a tight creek, so you've got 50 feet between you and the dock, which you should be at idle speed. But we'll give those individuals signs to put on their dock that just informs the boaters that, hey, if you're going to throw wake, you're responsible if it causes any damage. But those are the only kind of signs you're going to see down here. We've had people take buoys, no wake zone buoys, and put them up in a back creek. So if the buoy looks pretty derelict and it still has a DNR emblem on it, that's a little questionable sometimes where it came from.
Yeah, but that's a good point. So on the coast, and just like anywhere in South Carolina, so many people now are moving to our waterways, and they don't want a boat come by them, which is really not fair. But where there's areas of congestion, we have a system where we choose where no wake zones should be. As people continue to move to the coast, a lot of people want a wake zone everywhere they got a house. And it's just not possible because everybody doesn't want to take 45 minutes to go through a creek. And you shouldn't have to. But you are responsible for your wake if your wake causes damage when you're within 50 feet and 100 feet on certain lakes. Again, the rules change depending on the lake we're talking about. So you really need to look at your lakes, look at that, remember where you are. A lot of our inland lakes, it's 100 feet now, except for Lake Moultrie, where it's still 50. On the coast, a lot of times it's 50 feet, particularly in the intercoastal waterways, 50 feet, because the intercoastal waterway is very narrow. But one thing to remember, if you're traveling past the dock with a boat and you're, 100 feet or close to that boat and you're dragging that wake and you cause damage to that boat, that landowner can come against you civilly for that. So that's the truth. So you do need to watch your wake, even in areas where there's not a no wake zone. But the no wake zones, particularly on these big weekends, our officers will be watching that because there's a lot of traffic. So good point to be made there. On the big waterways in the Charleston Harbor, Dwayne, any words of wisdom there for folks who choose to go into the harbor?
Yeah, absolutely. So anywhere in the harbor, you want to definitely check your tides, see where the tide's at. Is it falling or is it rising? And make sure you know your channel. From starting this job, I've always been told the best GPS is your eyes. So you can look down at your actual GPS and see where a marked channel is, but in the Charleston Harbor and surrounding parts, you got to make sure you're looking up and you're seeing, is there a new sandbar there? Have the waters moved? Is there something that's obstructing your path? So that's what we see a lot of boats in the harbor getting grounded during this time of year because people, they don't really know the channel and they try and cut corners, and next thing you know, they're on a sandbar and they panic. So that's the biggest thing, especially during the day, but 100% at night, because you get out in the Charleston Harbor at night and you're looking for channel markers and half of them are not lit up, and all of a sudden the Charleston downtown is drowning out any lights that are actually there. So we want to make sure that people know if you're navigating at night, one big thing is you can't run with a light bar on. You can only have your navigation lights on. That's on the bow of your boat and the stern of your boat. but you need to be paying attention and seeing where you are. Are there obstructions in front of you? Is there another boat moving around you or towards you? Do they have their lights on? Because sometimes you'll see a black mass going across the harbor, somebody running without lights, and that's the biggest danger we have out there. And I know on 4th of July night when we have fireworks out in the Charleston Harbor, once the fireworks are over, we make sure we have officers placed at certain channel markers that are going to get people home, and we'll have those lit up so people can make sure they're navigating the right way home and get home safely if they can.
Absolutely. So one thing to talk about tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, because I know there are fireworks shows throughout the state on our waterways, not only in Charleston, Lake Marion, Lake Moultrie, up in Kiowee, Hartwell, Lake Murray for sure. There's fireworks shows sometimes Friday, Saturday, tomorrow night, of course, then Friday and Saturday as well across the state. So a lot of people be out in the water at night, a lot more than normal maybe, people gathering in big groups. So your navigation lights are critical. Make sure that both your bow light, which is your red and green light, and your stern light or your all-around light, which is white, is working. If you have a pontoon and you've got one of those folded up, you've got your bimini top folded up, and your light is in that bimini top, make sure it's folded out where it can be seen and not up in all the folds so someone can't see that light. Because the most important light on your boat is that white all-around light, because it can be seen 360 degrees. Your bow lights are important because the red and green lets people know what direction you're coming from, and that can help them know who's got the right of way. When it comes to tomorrow night, most people have no idea about navigation, but make sure your lights are on. Doing a good point, no extra lights on the boat, as in like a big, these LED lights everybody wants to put on. They used to be called docking lights. Now everybody puts a light bar on the boat so they can light up the water. And a lot of people feel like that helps them see better. But in actuality, if you've been boating a long time, you know that when you cut with your navigation lights, and if it's a decent lit night, you can see better reflection on the water without that big bright light. That big bright light will blind people to not be able to see your bow light, first of all, and they can't sometimes, like a deer in the headlights, tell which direction you're going, and it causes more accidents than it helps prevent. So do not have LED lights on, these light bars, docking lights on, as you're traveling about in the next few nights. Make sure your bow lights and your all-around light, stern light is working. Our officers will be out checking, and yes, they are there to write tickets if people don't have the lights on, and give you some type of light if they have them to help you be seen so you can be safe and safely return home. That's just part of the job, and on these big nights when we have these huge groups of people out on the water, it's critical that people have lights so they can be seen. So that's a very good point. One thing I will say as an old game warden, I got taught 25 years ago, if you ever cross a wake on the water at night, start looking, because something caused that wake. And a lot of times that can save you from running up in the back of somebody. If you cross a wake at night and you're not looking, there's a boat that caused that wake. Find out where that boat's at.
Absolutely.
Other than tides, good point. Tides are big. I laughed at myself last show. I talked about running a boat in the coastal areas at low tide so you know where your bars are. So when you come out of high tide, you can pretty much run and marking things. But you made a good point. So many things are constantly changing on the coast. Where on inland lakes, maybe you got a log that floats in. That's not as big a deal as a sandbar moving 100 feet on you, or sometimes 40 yards or whatever, and causing the whole channel to shift. And now you've got to learn a whole new route. You may have been running all year, and then all of a sudden it changes after a big storm. But that's the coast, and it happens all the time. Any other words of wisdom for our coastal folks this weekend?
I kind of tell everybody, be as safe as possible. Keep your eyes up. We have a lot of boaters down here. They kind of get tunnel vision like they're in a car and they look straight, but you can't ever be too hypervigilant in a boat. Just watching what other people are doing, paying attention to what they're doing, because if they're not paying attention but you are, you might save a life. That's the biggest thing, is do what you need to do to keep yourself safe and keep others safe while you're out there on the water.
Any concerns? I don't talk about this much on the show, so I want to mention it while I've got your expertise with us tonight. How about shipping lanes in Charleston? How big of a concern is that over the next few days?
So shipping containers are coming in and out. We have a lot of small boats they'll anchor out in the channel. So if you're between a red and green buoy, don't drop your anchor out. We've seen people sunbathing out in the channel. They'll do that. But if you ever see if the boat's bigger than you, and that includes container ships, a sport fisher, or even if you're in a 20-foot boat and you see a 35-foot boat go by, always watch that wake, because that wake's coming off that boat, especially those container ships, and it's a lot bigger than you think by the time it gets to you. So you always got to be safe when that wake's coming off those boats pretty fast and it's moving towards you. But otherwise, it's pretty well regulated out there in the Charleston Harbor, and just make sure you're not getting too close to those container ships, because they're moving a lot faster than you think, and they don't have the maneuverability that you have. So always kind of steer clear of them if they're coming towards you, and if you can, just kind of go behind them instead. Don't ever cut in front of them.
Absolutely. That's good words of wisdom. Edwina, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're almost through for the evening, but I appreciate everything you said. I want to wrap up tonight, Smitty, with a few things just to remember. Again, we've talked about running lights. That's a bigger deal during 4th of July because everybody's out at night looking at fireworks shows. Make sure your running lights are working before you get on the water. Check them, recheck them. I don't know how many times I've been on a boat, we're checking a boat, its lights aren't working, and their first comment is, well, they were just working earlier today, or they just quit. Well, every boat you go to says that. That doesn't mean they were all telling the truth. But check your running lights. Make sure you got your safety equipment on board, your life jackets for everybody on board, fits the intended user, where you can get to them, and they're in good condition. Make sure your boat registration is good. Again, everybody trying to get out in the water, getting boats out there that maybe hadn't gone in the water this year yet, or maybe in a few years, make sure your registration's good. Make sure all your safety equipment's on board, your whistle, fire extinguisher, if it's required for you to have a fire extinguisher, make sure your fire extinguisher's in good shape. If you haven't checked it a while before you go out tomorrow and this weekend, check it. Make sure that it's in the green, that it's in good shape, because if you need it, it's not going to do you any good if it's empty and doesn't work. So that's the biggest tips for this weekend. We hope everybody has a safe 4th. We want everybody to, we want to have just as many people alive and well on Sunday as we do today. We don't want a boating accident, because safety is no boating accidents. So thanks for letting us on the show tonight, and I hope that folks have a great 4th of July tomorrow and a safe weekend.
Absolutely. Happy 4th of July to you as well, Major Downer, and tremendous tips. And, hey, stay hydrated out there, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be hot on the water, so make sure you got hydration out there. And we didn't talk about this, but I will mention on the way out the door, because we got maybe a minute left. Our officers will be out there enforcing our boating under the influence laws for sure. 4th of July is a time people like to celebrate. People like to have a beer on the water, and it's not illegal to have a beer on the water. What is illegal to do is to operate a boat under the influence. You notice I'm not going to say .08, because that's legally under the influence for sure. That's legally being drunk. But before .08, you can be under the influence. So if you're drinking, don't drive the boat. Get somebody else. Get a designated driver for the boat, just like you would a car, so that you can get out there, have a good time, and safely return back. Make sure the person you designate as driver of the boat knows how to drive the boat and knows where the safety equipment is, so that they can get it in case you need it. That's our biggest tips for the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care of each other. And just as Major Downer said, take extra time tomorrow, making sure you have everything, registration, safety first tomorrow. Thank you so much, Major Downer. That's SC Wild for this week.